Hello and welcome to this short video description of a war game based on the 1780 Battle of Charlotte. This was a very small battle which occurred during the American War of Independence that I recreated mostly as an excuse to use my newly constructed model of the Mecklenburg County Courthouse, which stood in Charlotte and was key to its defence. So how did the battle come about and who was involved? In early 1780, the British implemented their southern strategy to bring down the rebellion in the American colonies, having already secured Savannah, Georgia. Charleston, South Carolina was captured in May, along with most of the rebel Southern Army. This compelled George Washington to detach troops from his main army to march south and join with local militia to counter British operations in the Carolinas. This new Southern Army was led by General Horatio Gates and included the excellent Continental regiments from Maryland and Delaware. In August 1780, Gates encountered a British army commanded by Lord Cornwallis just north of Camden. Poor American tactics resulted in an overwhelming defeat, after which Cornwallis paused in the vicinity of Waxhaws. Feeling confident that British and Loyalist forces were now in control of Georgia and South Carolina, and keen to polish off the remnants of the Continental Army routed at Camden, in mid-September, Cornwallis began a march towards Charlotte, North Carolina. These movements were being closely watched by various militia forces. Those of Thomas Sumter hung back to launch a series of harassing raids in the South Carolina backcountry. Those of William R. Davie stuck closer to Cornwallis as he moved northwards. Davie ambushed a Loyalist detachment at Wahab's plantation on September the 20th, before moving on to Charlotte, where he adopted a defensive stance. At this time, Charlotte was a small settlement of some 20 buildings, situated at the crossing of two roads. The Mecklenburg County Courthouse dominated the junction and stood atop brick pillars to create a marketplace underneath. Between the pillars was a wall, standing 3.5 feet tall. This formed the centre of Davie's position. The advance guard of Cornwallis's army, as it approached Charlotte, was commanded by Major George Hanger, in the absence of Lieutenant Colonel Bannister Tarleton, who was suffering with yellow fever. Ironically, the troops of the advance guard were more or less the same who Davie had embarrassed at Wahab's plantation a few days earlier. Hanger was under orders to cautiously reconnoitre the town. However, he carelessly rode into town at the head of the light dragoons of the British Legion into the musketry and rifle fire of Davie's militia. Hanger was wounded and the Legion forced to fall back from the town in confusion, joining the Legion infantry and awaiting redcoat reinforcements. A further attack was delivered by the British Legion, ordered forward by an unimpressed Cornwallis, as his British light infantry and experienced regiments began to come up towards the town. With British forces strengthening, and having delivered a bloody nose to Hanger and Cornwallis, it was now time for Davie to exercise his discretion and withdraw to fight another day. His actions seemed to generate some caution in the British army, who abandoned their intended advance to Hillsborough and opted to occupy Charlotte. The militia remained active, however, and the garrison was never secure. In October, a Loyalist detachment commanded by Patrick Ferguson was annihilated at Kings Mountain to the west of Charlotte, and in November, Cornwallis withdrew to Winnsboro in South Carolina. On the tabletop, we can see the town of Charlotte with the courthouse among the small number of buildings. The church is a Renedra kit, the larger houses are hovels resin casting, the tavern was scratch built, and the courthouse was constructed using various items from war bases in Scotland. I've made a separate video showing how the courthouse model was constructed, which you can find on this channel. Around the town I've placed typical scenery for this setting, with plenty of woodland and fields. To create orders of battle for the game, I used information from Greg Novak's volume on the Southern campaigns. Units are represented at an approximate scale of one figure representing 10 actual soldiers. The British forces in the game are the advance guard commanded by Hanger, who would later be reinforced by the first of the supporting regiments to arrive, the 23rd Foot, Royal Welsh Fusiliers, led by Colonel James Webster. These are a mixture of Perry miniatures and figures from the earlier range sculpted for Wargame's Foundry by Alan Perry. The British Legion infantry are heavily converted plastic figures using pieces from the British infantry and Continental infantry boxes, as well as some Napoleonic British arms, and at least one metal figure just to confuse you. The Legion cavalry includes some converted 16th Light Dragoons in smocks with head swaps. The rebel forces are the troops Davy had to hand. The corps is 300 North Carolina militia that are fielded as 3 companies. Supporting these are Davy's own unit of light horse and some riflemen. These are just about all Perry miniatures, with the militia being a mixture of metal and plastic figures. I think the militia drummer might actually be from the Wargames Foundry French Revolution range. The rules used for the game are my own bloody backs, which you can find in their 9th edition over on my blog at paintingshed.blogspot. To defend the town, Davy placed 1 militia company in the courthouse, 1 in the tavern supported by the riflemen, and the 3rd over on his right flank behind a fence. The light horse were held in reserve behind the courthouse. Just as at the real battle, Hanger and the Legion Dragoons galloped straight up the road and into town, where they found a hornet's nest of rebel musketry and rifle fire. Heavily disordered and taking losses, they were then struck by Davy's light horsemen. Only appalling luck on the part of this charge saved Hanger, who forced his men onwards up the road to escape the gauntlet, while Davy's cavalry fled the field. In the meantime, the Legion infantry formed line and advanced up the road towards town, with the British light companies moving up on their left flank to engage the militia behind the fence. A destructive volley from those militia halted the redcoats in their tracks, however, and both sides settled into a firefight at the edge of town. Hanger turned his dragoons around, and despite still being disordered, they again rode through the town, intent on reaching the safety of their own line so they could recover their order. This did not go well. Again the dragoons were pummeled by the militia shooting, and this time their morale gave way and they routed. This brought the game to an end. Hanger's attack had stalled, but the British were now arriving in force, with the Royal Welsh Fusiliers relieving the light companies and putting pressure on militia companies behind the fence and in the courthouse. It was clearly time for Davy to pull his men out of town, and with the Legion Dragoons in rout, there was little Cornwallis could do to stop him. So there we have it, a quick and enjoyable game that recreated historical events well. Had Davy been just a little less unlucky with his cavalry charge, things could have gone even worse for Hanger, and probably deservedly so. Thanks for watching.